I would bet up to 72 pence that the storyboard is the difference between making a bad comic and a good comic, and I'll fight anyone who disagrees with me, or get my wife to fight for me. If you find that you're struggling to create a comic, you're not entirely convinced by what you're drawing, or you find that it's taking a lot longer than it should, then this video will definitely help. So what's so great about storyboards? You may have tried them in the past and found that they didn't really help, but I think that's because you've not been using them properly. Now, there isn't one right or one wrong way of using them, but to get the most out of them, you need to think a bit like a movie director. See, comics aren't that much different than films. They're both visual mediums and both rely on interesting camera shots or viewpoints to keep the viewers engaged. Where the storyboard comes in is it allows you to explore these different shots in a really quick way. Instead of having your comic page in front of you, creating some panels and then trying to draw within those panels cold, get rid of the comic page and create a storyboard instead. Now that you have something like this, you can create some loose, quick sketches of your panels and see them side by side. This allows you to see everything in front of you and pick out the shots that you want to keep, change, or disregard entirely. The fact that these are all the same size can really help because it provides some uniformity and order, which is ideal when you've got thousands of ideas buzzing around your head. But it's not just about the camera, it's also about the pacing. If you're working on your comic page by page, even if you're drawing loosely, it can be difficult to keep track of the pacing of your story. Oftentimes, it's not until you're several pages or hours into making your comic that you realize that you needed to add more panels to make the scene work better. In other cases, it might be that you're dragging out your scene a bit too long and you don't notice this until you've already drawn them. And probably most commonly of all, you won't notice either of those two scenarios because you're too focused on this single page. It can be really demoralizing to sink hours and hours of time and energy into these individual pages, only to realize that they're actually taking away from the story that you're trying to tell. But with the trusty storyboard, you can figure out all of this in a fraction of the time. And time is another big factor in this. In fact, I'll admit I didn't really understand storyboards for quite a while and I actually thought they were a bit of a waste of time. I wanted to get into the comic book making process as quickly as humanly possible, and I kind of figure out the composition and the designs as I went. If you are also guilty of doing this, then you're running a massive risk that could potentially ruin your comic. Also, by creating a storyboard first, you're actually speeding everything up, not slowing it down. That may sound counterintuitive because if you make a storyboard first, then that's more work, right? The reason it's not is because one of the most difficult things about making a good comic book is by creating engaging camera shots and making sure that the pacing is tight to keep the pages turning. If you can figure these elements out before you start your comic, then when you actually do create your comic, you'll create it a lot faster. So another point for storyboards there. If you've not done storyboards before or you've not done them properly, then I'd really recommend that you do it for your next comic project. Even if you're in the middle of your comic, try storyboarding for the rest of it and see what difference that makes. And if you're still thinking, I don't know how to do a storyboard, then have a look online at storyboard artists' portfolios. Most of those portfolios will be for things like animations, or they may even be animatics, so keep that in mind. And if that's confusing, a storyboard for an animation will often have more panels than one for a comic book would. But ultimately, the storyboard that you create is for your benefit and your benefit alone. So for some of you, it might take 1 or 2 panels to figure out a shot or pacing or something else, whereas for others it might take 5 or 6. And out of those 5 or 6 that you create, you may only end up using 1. Storyboarding, like me, is a powerful tool, and if you use it to its full potential, it will change the outcome of your comics. Have fun drawing, and if you want to know another quick way of learning how to make comics, then watch this video here where I talk about why making mini comics can help.